Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you. What a humbling experience to be on this pulpit this evening. I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I'm humbled by it at the same time. I would like to begin by quoting the words of Jesus. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for justice, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. We come with this thirst and hunger for justice, for righteousness, hoping to be satisfied. And we come with those in Gaza in mind, those who are mourning, hoping and pleading that they will be comforted. I truly wish I was here in different circumstances. We are broken by the continuation of this genocide more than 10 months after it had started. I'm troubled that we have to continue to call just for a ceasefire 10 months after this war of genocide has broken. And in fact, it feels that we're not simply calling for a ceasefire, we're calling for the world to humanize the people of Gaza, to humanize Palestinians. It's heartbreaking to continue to call against the normalization of a genocide. This is a genocide that is happening in front of all the world to see. No one can claim we did not know. How many more need to be killed until the world agrees enough is enough? How many families need to lose everything? How many more pictures we need to share of children pulled from under the rubble before the world sees us as humans? Today, I think, in particular, of Muhammad Abu al-Qamsan. Keep the name. And Jumana Abu al-Qamsan. We must remember the names. Muhammad, with his family, was displaced from northern Gaza to Deir al-Balah in the center, to a so-called safe zone. Friends, there are no safe zones in Gaza. They're lying. Nowhere is safe. Muhammad and his wife Jumana were gifted with a newborn twins. They were 4 days old, 4 days. And Muhammad wanted to obtain birth certificates for his twins. And when he returned, he discovered that an Israeli airstrike had killed his wife, his mother-in-law, and their newborn twins. They were 4. I wonder if you've seen the images of Muhammad holding the birth certificates of his 2 children. Really heart-wrenching images. And again, we ask, how many more need to be killed before the world sees the children of Gaza as human? And today I feel compelled to say their names, Asir and Isir. They join more than 16,000 children killed in this war, which includes more than 2,000 infants. And for us Palestinians, it feels like we've seen the image of each one of them. Though to the world they remain faceless, nameless, mere statistics, flash pictures on news outlets, 15,000, 14,000, 16,000. I really wish I could say their names, but we must remember them. And as Palestinians, we must pledge to continue the fight to humanize our children, and that we will not forget. And if the world does not see them as equal, I know it is not so for God. For the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. And I hold so fast to this promise. Friends, let's be clear. This is a genocide. There should not be a dispute about what is happening in Gaza. This is a genocide in which both the victims and those committing it are broadcasting live images, and the world is still deliberating. And as I said, no one can claim they did not know. No one can claim we wish we knew the severity of the actions. And that's why we will continue to say as Palestinians, your apologies after the genocide will not be accepted. The hard reality is that it seems we're still far from the end. Warlords are determined to continue this madness. We're fearful. And many of us are weary. But please, we cannot stop. We cannot stop talking about Gaza. We owe it to the people of Gaza. We owe it to their courage. In fact, I feel we failed them. And the least we could do is to continue talking, to continue advocating, to continue with our action, to continue calling not just for a ceasefire, but for those who commit war crimes to be held accountable. It's really important. We live in a world in which those who commit war crimes are welcomed like heroes in the Congress of the Empire. This is the kind of world we live in. And that's why I said it's not enough to call for a ceasefire. We must call for justice and accountability. Friends, I come to the United States with a message from the Palestinian people, the Palestinian church. It's a message, it's a call to the American people, to faith leaders, and in particular to the American church. And my first point is worth repeating over and over and over, namely that this war did not start on October 7th. We must continue to address the root causes of all of this. And not just the Nakba from 76 years ago. Because as my good friend, Palestinian theologian Yusuf Khoury said, this genocide began with the phrase, a land without people. This is when we were erased as Palestinians. They looked at the land, they saw people, but they saw a land without people because to them we are not people of equal worth. This is colonialism. And today, we must say it clearly. We must recognize Israel as a settler colonial entity. I hope I'm not saying anything controversial here. This is the root causes of the issue. 76 years ago, Israel was not created on an empty land. How many times do we have to repeat? 800,000 Palestinians at least were displaced, were ethnically cleansed when Israel was created. In fact, when we talk about Gaza, 80% of the people of Gaza are Nakba survivors. And I'm shocked, I'm baffled that the media doesn't mention this, which is a very important component of the whole discourse. Israel as a state was literally built on the ruins of the towns and villages of the people of Gaza. Why isn't anybody talking about this? What do we need to do in order for the world to recognize the 76 years of oppression and ethnic cleansing that Palestinians continue to suffer from? Why is it that the international law continues to be ignored when it comes to the Palestinians? I really wish or wonder, is there a footnote in the international law books that says, with the exception of Palestinians? What do we need to do to qualify? I look at this war and what happened in this war alone. Hospitals, churches, mosques were destroyed. Does anything matter about the human rights? Do they matter? Why isn't anybody talking about preventing even today, preventing food from entering into Gaza? And that is why we will continue to repeat as Palestinians. I never want to hear any American or European lecture us on the international law or the human rights anymore. We must say it. Why isn't anybody talking about apartheid in Palestine? Why aren't we naming apartheid? And I'm shocked, especially by the church. To be honest, I'm baffled by the church, because for years, the Western church lectured us on human rights. And then when you have numerous human rights organizations, I mean the whole human rights community agrees, has proven, has documented that there is apartheid in Palestine. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, you name it. And even the Israeli human rights organization, B'Tselem and Yesh Din, have said it is apartheid. You know who's not saying it's apartheid? It's the church. And by the way, Palestinians have documented and proven it is apartheid long before, but because of prejudice, no one takes us seriously. But now there is a consensus, including many UN reports, and I'm still baffled that we still have for the church to take these reports seriously. And I will continue to call out church leaders. If you don't want to take these reports seriously and name Israel as an apartheid state, you should declare publicly that you no longer believe in human rights and the international law. And I continue to be shocked how someone like the great late Desmond Tutu is celebrated all over the world for his activism. Yet when he says there is apartheid in Palestine, everyone ignores him. Why? Why? So I must ask again, are we less human? Because this war has confirmed to us that many in the West do not see us as equal. The whole world stopped, and I mean stopped, at the wake of October 7th. And I hope we all agree that killing families in their home or kidnapping children is wrong. It's evil, it must be condemned. I hope we all agree. Why is everybody silent about the Palestinians kidnapped? 9,000 Palestinians have been kidnapped since October 7th. Why is everyone silent? Why isn't the world talking about the Palestinians kidnapped, tortured, starved, raped, led to die in detention? And it's documented. Are we less human? And all of this, by the way, shows the power of empire in controlling the narrative and calling things. Once you say they are terrorists, you say we kidnapped, we arrested them, they are in prison. And that is okay to the international community. That seems enough for the international community to turn a blind eye, even though, by the way, they are detained without a lawyer, without charges. And we continue to ask, what needs to happen for the international community to finally act as if we're humans? For the international law to apply. So don't tell me it's not racism. Don't tell me it's not coloniality. And don't tell me that the days of colonialism are over. If my first point was this war did not start on October 7th, my second point is that the American church is complicit in all of this. And it's not just the American church, it's the Western church. And we need to call it, we need to name it. Theology played a role from the beginning. I just mentioned the phrase, a land without people. We associate that term with Zionism. Let me remind you that Christian Zionists said this before Jewish Zionists. Christian Zionism predates Jewish Zionism. In fact, Christian Zionists are far more in number than Jewish Zionists. For 76 years, we've watched the Bible weaponized against us, the Palestinians. For 76 years, we had to listen to theologies and lectures and talks and videos celebrating God's faithfulness to the Jewish people, even though that faithfulness meant the Nakba and the displacement of Palestinians. For 76 years, we had to hear the phrase, Jews return to their land. A phrase that is echoed and repeated in all church traditions. A phrase that displaces us as Palestinians, makes us immediately the strangers in our own land because someone else is now returning to their land. This is the kind of discourse that was imposed on us as Palestinians. And by the way, when Palestinians say this is our land, we're not making a political statement. This is not a statement in a political dispute. When we say our land, we mean this is land we've owned and farmed and inherited for generations upon generations upon generations upon generations. You have to understand. We're deeply rooted in this land. This is what we mean when we say this is our land. Yet somehow, we have to continue to hear, and not just hear, but this has been imposed on us. Friends, colonialism needed a pretext, and theology served that purpose, providing the pretext of whether it's fulfillment of prophecy, Jewish return to their land, the restoration of the Jewish people, and you name it. And in that process, they imposed their beliefs on the Palestinians, which by the way shocks me that the very same people who always claim and boast about religious freedoms are imposing their religious beliefs on someone else. And I want to ask, are you listening to yourselves? I truly want to ask these questions. Are you listening to yourselves in terms of what you are asking Palestinians to accept? The idea that there is a dispute and somehow you solve that dispute by saying, well, God said so. How can I argue with you if your side of the story is God said so? Or even worse, when you say, God gave me the land, how can I talk with you? Or God gave them the land. So I must ask, are you listening to yourselves, what you're asking Palestinians to accept? Not only that, please, show me one other conflict, show me one other context in which the reference point to a dispute is a religious text rather than the international law or even human rights. Where does it happen? And here is the sad irony, namely that in Palestine, human rights are abused using the very same religious texts that were supposed to protect our human rights. This is the weaponization of holy text against us as Palestinians. Theology continues today to serve the purpose of justifying not just this colonization of our land or apartheid in Palestine, but even this genocide. And I wish I have the time to share with you how so many pastors, theologians, activists supported, not just defended, but supported this genocide using religious text, using the Bible. And it shocks us as Palestinians. And I continue to hear, well, doesn't the Bible say so and so? And again, before I answer, I want you to listen to yourself, what you're asking me to accept as a Palestinian or for that matter as anybody. Because when you ask me, doesn't the Bible say so, and try then to justify your Christian Zionist position, in essence, you're asking me to try to study the Bible to argue whether or not God is a racist, violent God. This is what Christian Zionism is. A God of supremacy, a God who favors people based on their nationality or even DNA, a God who does not mind ethnically cleansing people to give room for new ones. And then you ask me, doesn't the Bible say so and so? And I must ask again, are you listening to yourselves? This is what has been echoed and repeated over and over and over in many church circles. And now we're being asked to even accept that God is a God of a genocide. In fact, some pastors, actually he's now in the Congress, he's in the Congress, who was a pastor before he was in the Congress. I wouldn't even say his name. and who went to seminaries suggested that we should get it over with quickly with Gaza using the example of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it makes us wonder, what Jesus are you reading? Honestly, what Jesus are you reading? Does the ethic of Jesus matter in these circumstances? And it's really hard for us, from the Middle East in particular, to understand this obsession with war and violence in the American church and American context. The fact that this man cites Hiroshima and Nagasaki as good examples in this day shocks me. And this is an elected congressman. He's not a fringe voice. And maybe we shouldn't be surprised that these things exist in this very particular context. In this country, you know something or two about the Bible being weaponized to justify settler colonialism, right? Maybe we shouldn't be surprised that a country with a history of settler colonialism is supporting a settler colonial state today. Sadly and shamefully, the Bible has been weaponized in the past to justify segregation. It has been misused to justify slavery. In South Africa, it was abused to justify apartheid. In May, I had the honor of visiting South Africa, of walking in the shoes of our heroes of faith there, learning from their feet, under their feet. And I preached in churches and I spoke at seminaries, universities, and they would tell me, this is the pulpit from which the first sermon on apartheid was preached. And I spoke in a university and they said, this is where the first theology of apartheid was written. And I couldn't help but ask, how does anybody read the Bible and conclude apartheid? In the same way today, we as Palestinian Christians can't help but ask, how does anybody read the Bible, read about Jesus, the embodiment of love, of mercy and compassion, and conclude Christian Zionism? Just show me how. And you know, someone once said, in the beginning, God created us in His own image, and since then, we've been returning the favor. And I think today, many reflect their own supremacy and prejudice on the character of God. This is what's happening. And if this war has taught us anything, it's that it's not only the Christian Zionists who are complicit, because so many in the mainline tradition as well shocked us with their positions, and I mean shocked us. Many told us this is a war of self-defense. In fact, some churches said Israel has the sacred duty to defend itself. And of course, we as Palestinians continue to wonder, do we ever get the right to defend ourselves, to defend our lands? And by the way, I say this as someone who's deeply committed to creative nonviolent resistance. But the question must be asked. The question must be asked. Why is it that when one group defends itself or commits violence, it's self-defense, when another people commits violence, it's terrorism? Again, this is the power of empire in dictating the terms. We must call it out. And of course, we will continue to ask, how is the colonizer defending itself from the colonized? And how is the killing of 16,000 Some use the just war theory. The just war theory is yet one more articulation of the logic of might, of the logic of empire, a convenient way the empire uses to justify its expansion and colonialism on the expense of the vulnerable. And then we call it a just war. Again, it's this obsession with power. It's obsession even with revenge. It's theological supremacy, to decide and to give it to yourself to decide on whether a war or just or it's not just. We were told the invasion of Iraq was a just war. And look at the catastrophe that happened there. And for those who use the just war theory, what you have in essence done is that you have called the killing of 16,000 children and more the justice of God. Can we accept that? This is not the Jesus way. And again, the obsession with war in the US and the American church continues to shock me. What about the ethics of Jesus? And why is it in America that you always think that the way to solve problems is yet another war? In this war, many in the mainline, liberal, progressive, Christian traditions were silent. And their silence was so loud. Silence is complicity. If we are silent about an injustice that happens at our doorsteps and say nothing and do nothing, what we're saying in essence is that we approve this violence. We approve this injustice. And what you're even saying is that we don't care because God does not care. That's why I continue to say this silence was so loud. A silence that told us Palestinians that God does not care about our misery and suffering. This is the sin of apathy, of indifference that has plagued the church in many circles. The sin of seeing injustice literally at our doorsteps and doing nothing or saying nothing. And many times, in many ways, the church did not say nothing because they simply wanted to avoid controversy. We were told it's a controversial topic. We shouldn't talk about it. In other words, they chose comfort. They chose comfort over confronting injustice. This is a comfortable church that cares more about avoiding controversy more than it cares about justice. Imagine if Jesus walked on earth avoiding controversy. Yet somehow the disciples of Jesus have managed to create a theology and a reality in which all they can do in the face of injustice is pray for peace and make a statement. This is the moderate church, the peaceful church, the church that by all means doesn't want to offend anybody and yet end up saying nothing and staying silent in the face of a genocide. And I must acknowledge that I'm not just saying this message to any people group, because I'm here in the United States. And this is a different context, because we all know too well that this war of genocide would not be possible without the financial and military support of the United States. And without the political cover of the United States. Friends, it's your money. And it's the officials you have elected. And when you're silent over those decisions, you're telling us in essence that you approve how your Congress and President spends this money. And that if money is spent on apartheid and a genocide, you don't mind. This is what your silence is telling us. And it's telling us that when your politicians that you have elected vote to continue this war of genocide, that you have no problem with it, that you actually support that decision. This is why it's clear to me that silence is complicity, especially within this context.